Short question to start out. If you think about Siberia, what are the first things that come to your mind? The frozen surface of Lake Baikal with its beautifully blue colors, the Trans-Siberian Railway with its 9.2 thousand kilometers of length going through mesmerizing scenery, the eternal cold reigning over the region? These were the common answers I got from friends when I asked them this exact question. Besides one or maybe two outliers, there wasn't all that much other stuff being mentioned. 3 answers total. That's not that much, isn't it? Siberia is a region that isn't really being covered, at least according to my perception, be it by news outlets, be it by other YouTubers. Therefore, most of y'all probably aren't that deeply aware about the looming problems endangering the region at this current moment. I want to highlight them by talking about the problematic state of Siberian cities and their people living there. Siberian cities kinda are in trouble in a way incomparable to Western cities, or any city at all for that matter. That geographic location alone would generate enough reason to make the strong distinction. But it's far more than that. Let's have a look. Short story, it's really cold. Longer story, many cities like Norilsk, Yakutsk, Irkutsk, just to name a few here, are built directly upon permafrost soil. This special kind of soil is characterized by its upper layer seasonally thawing and freezing, and its underlying layer being, well, permanently frozen. And it has one really important function regarding our climate. Permafrost soil is an incredible carbon storage system. It alone accounts for around 70% of all carbon stored in the ground's circumpolar around the North Pole. The amount stored is estimated to be around 1000 gigatons of carbon. This number converted into CO2 would equal around 3670 gigatons or billion tons, however you want to call it. To put the gigantic number into perspective, the IEA or the International Energy Agency estimated that the global carbon dioxide emissions from 2022 are around 36.8 gigatons, a new all-time high by the way. That is around 1% of what is stored in permafrost alone, 1 singular percent. So preserving the soil would be in Russia's and generally in global interest, right? While the current way Siberian cities are running, it's next to impossible in these regions right now. To get this point across a little better, let's take an accurate look at the northernmost metropolis in the entire world. Norilsk is a dirty city, to put it lightly. To understand how it became the freezing dirt hole it is now, I think it's time for a little history lesson. The first construction started in the 1920s upon discovering enormous amounts of minerals in the ground of North Krasnoyarsk. In the span of a decade, hundreds of workers moved to the newly found place to start digging up the precious minerals. To increase the efficiency and the workforce, it was decided to construct a gulag there in 1934. At that time, some couple hundred workers had already moved up there. The number one goal was to get the mining efficiency into fucking overdrive mode. The Soviet government liked the development of the location, therefore its local gulag was increasingly filled with political prisoners to keep them as far away from the rest of civilization as possible. The nearest somewhat bigger settlement, Dudinka, is about 60 to 70 kilometers away, and marching this distance in these harsh conditions, well, it's borderline impossible. In the continuing decades, the mining of said minerals became more and more important for the economy of Norilsk. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Norilsk Nickel was founded. Norilsk Nickel, or for short Nornickel, both work, is one of the world's leading nickel, copper and palladium mining and smelting companies. The company turned Norilsk into a so-called monogorod, or monotown. This basically means that the city is entirely or more or less dependent on one single factory or company, which creates this immense dependency between city and enterprise. A non-Russian example for this is the German town Wolfsburg, which was built as a main factory place for the company that today is known as Volkswagen. Nearly everyone living there has a direct connection to Volkswagen, either by working there or by living in the apartments built for the workers. There simply isn't much else. Same as in Wolfsburg, most adults work directly for Norilsk Nickel or in side companies associated with it. At peak times in the 1980, around 140,000 out of the 175,000 people living in Norilsk were directly or indirectly working for Norilsk Nickel. There's one giant problem that is caused by this over-centralization. All the built factories emit immense amount of greenhouse gases, which accelerates global warming like crazy. In 2015 alone, nearly 1.9 million tons of air pollution of all kinds were emitted by the company alone. Plus, no other site or city emits more sulfur dioxide than Norilsk by itself, around 1,884 kilotons or million tons, until 2029. Sulfur dioxide, which by the way is responsible for the smell of burnt matches, is more immediately dangerous to us humans than carbon dioxide, which is really harmful long term due to climate change and stuff. Breathing in SO2 increases the risk for multiple illnesses regarding the respiratory system and premature death. The result of the continuous pollution is a drastic increase in permafrost melting, which itself also accelerates climate change, which increases CO2 emissions, which accelerates climate change. It's just one big vicious cycle. Around 450,000 hectares of the surrounding ecosystem is mostly or completely destroyed, permanently. Just for comparison's sake, the size of Rhode Island is about 400k hectare. Looking at views of the city, there is hardly any nature left in the immediate vicinity. It's absolutely insane. Siberia's greenhouse gases also contribute heavily into the so-called Arctic haze. To break it down, Arctic haze is a man-made, visible fog-like accumulation in high latitudes of the Arctic at around 4 to 5 minimum kilometers maximum height. These are mainly pollutants originating from East Asia, North America and, well, Russia. Its density blocks a huge amount of sunlight over a long period of time. Its chemical parts, which aren't just methane or CO2, cause a much longer persistent blockade, which accelerates global warming like crazy. Logically, this raises the question, why is this kind of industry still this active to this day? Well, because Russia heavily benefits financially from it, ignoring the long-term consequences. And cities like Norilsk are beyond the point where truly significant changes can take place. Time is ticking, based on estimates by the first ever International Conference on Urbanization in the Arctic. Norilsk's mineral deposits will be depleted between 2042 and 2062. In 40 years, at max, Norilsk's primary source of income will be gone, and with it, its only purpose to have ever existed. You simply cannot prepare yourself adequately for the life you're about to have when moving to Norilsk. Winter begins in September and ends in May. The omnipresent polar night ensures a severe vitamin D deficiency. The most serious danger, though, is the at times catastrophic air quality as a result from the metallurgic industry, especially the production centered around nickel, polluting in insane dimensions as I've stated previously. To visualize my point, tumors are detected way earlier in Norilsk's residents compared to the Russian average. Around 69% of the Russian population over the age of 60 is being diagnosed once or more with a tumor of any kind. In Norilsk, however, around 78% of the town population at the age of 40 to 59, so even younger, is being diagnosed once or more. The average age for someone being affected by lung cancer is 55 years in Norilsk. 55! Compare this to the Krasnodar Krai, a region in southwestern Russia. There, the average age of a lung cancer patient is 63, almost 8 years of difference. The most glaring example, however, is the overall life expectancy. In 2019, so before the Ukraine-Russia war, according to the WHO, the average lifespan for a person living in Russia was around 73.2 years. In Norilsk, however, the lifespan hovers around 59 to 60 years. Going off the mentioned WHO data, if you would rank the city with all other countries of this world in terms of life expectancy, it would be 7th or 8th lowest, comparing with African developing countries like Chad or Guinea-Bissau. This raises the question, why on God's green earth would someone ever live there voluntarily? Norilsk Nickel. As paradoxical as this may sound, This company is the biggest con and simultaneously the biggest pro argument for living in Norilsk. Well, of course, no one would migrate towards town when working there wouldn't be extremely profitable. Norilsk Nickel knows that. Wages are amongst the highest in the entire country. Many people accept this deal, sacrificing health for earning much money to have a relatively luxurious life after retirement. Only around 15% of the entire population living there was actually born there, most of them being descendants from the survivors of the local gulag. And yet, Norilsk's population sank since the fall of the Soviet Union, from 230,000 in 1990 to 183,000 as of January 2023. Russia, before the war of Ukraine, has been experiencing an economic upswing since the 1990s. Therefore, all regions got more wealthy, which makes Norilsk less of a monetary paradise. To get a grip on how it really is to live there, it's helpful to get an opinion about it from someone that actually lives there or has lived there. See, if you use TikTok or any other social media in the last few years, you might have heard songs like these. What you just heard, if you don't know already, is funk music. Funk was hyped in the last 2 to 3 years. Now in 2024 it has died down a bit. And while scrolling through some Spotify profiles of artists, I stumbled upon V21. He started uploading songs on Spotify in 2021, and in his bio there was this sentence: the independent musician from one of the northernmost cities in the world, from Norilsk. Last year I had the opportunity to interview him over Instagram/WhatsApp. Check out his music, he produced some fucking bangers. All the social links will be down in the description as per usual. From his own words, I'ma read out some messages which are compiled into one big long paragraph. I lived there until I was 16 and life there seemed normal because there was nothing to compare it with. I can say that the city has a high standard of living and income compared to other Russian cities, but there are much more disadvantages. It's a very dirty city due to production of metals in the city. There are no trees and there is little oxygen in the air. Goods are expensive due to the complexity of logistics, as there are no land roads to other major cities, especially fruits and supplements against the vitamin D deficiency, which many people have here, are very hard to come by. After all, there is almost no sun in the winter and it's dark for almost 24 hours a day. Eternal cold, minus 40 degrees Celsius is the norm. Children walk outside in minus 30 to minus 40 degrees. I played football with friends like that and my toes were frostbitten afterwards. There is also strong wind sometimes. It's strong enough to blow away people and roofs of houses. It's called a black blizzard. At this time, people try not to leave their houses at all. Even if you drive away from the city, which is very difficult by itself, and you need to be well prepared for this, then there is almost untouched nature. There are huge flocks of reindeer, and there are a lot of fish in the reservoirs. Students often can't and won't go to school because of bad weather. It has to be decided day by day if the weather is suitable enough for going to school. I remember not going to school for almost a month in a row because of this. No one wants to be here. It's only for the money. In Norilsk, you can get up to $1,000 per month or even more, which is considered a lot in this country. In the end, it's not the worst place to live in Russia. It's better to live here than to live in the dirt somewhere else. As mentioned before, time is ticking. The resource reserves are depleting in the next 50 or so years. The average age of Norilsk's residents is also rising year by year. With a continuation of this trend, it's really questionable that Norilsk Nickel can continue the same amount of work it currently does. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, Norilsk lost around 93,000 inhabitants. The only thing going against this is the global phenomenon of rural exodus. This basically describes the increasing amount of young people leaving their rural area to pursue a better life, meaning a better scholarship or job somewhere in an urban region. If Norilsk continues to be this dominant face of the city though, every counteraction just extends life support a bit, and Norilsk will lose its only purpose one day, just to turn into a shell of its past, without much purpose, leaving behind irreparable natures for centuries to come.